preach or charge a hill, but I'm here for it. Hey, good morning. If you have your Bible, open it up to Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians 6. You're gonna see it on the screen off the top here. We've been walking through the book of Ephesians for the past few weeks. And what you see on the screen here, before we get into the text itself, what I want to do is walk through a bit of how we got here in the book of Ephesians. Because Ephesians 6 that we're talking about today, it isn't random. It isn't just something that we're tacking on at the end of the book. Ephesians 6 is the outworking of everything that Paul has built toward in the book of Ephesians. The first 4 verses of Ephesians 6 that you'll see on the screen there, it's about parenting. But really to feel the force of what Paul is talking about when it comes to parenting, you gotta see how it fits into the flow of the whole book. Paul doesn't just drop parenting advice out of nowhere. It's not like Paul is just sitting in his Roman prison cell writing the book of Ephesians and thinking, oh man, I forgot to talk to them about parenting, gotta tack that on there, make sure they know how to parent their kids well. That's not what he's doing. It's very intentional the way that Paul sets up the book of Ephesians, and he ends with marriage that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Gary talked about what it looks like to have a godly marriage. This week, we're talking about parenting in Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. Next week, Richard's gonna talk about work and what it looks like to bring the gospel into your work. Marriage, parenting, and work. Everything that Paul's been building toward in the book of Ephesians has led to this. 3 places where the gospel is most likely going to hit the road in your life. 3 places that are naturally gonna be tension points, pressure points. They're gonna conform you more to what God has already done in your life. Let me see if I can explain it like this. Go to the next slide real quick, because here's what we're going for in Ephesians. Parenting isn't about rehearsing rules. It's not about rehearsing rules. It's about retraining your reflexes in light of the gospel. That's the whole point of Paul's 4 verses in Ephesians about parenting. It isn't about rehearsing rules. It's about retraining your reflexes in light of the gospel. Because what he's getting at here is that what's happening in the home is simply a reflection of what's already happening in the heart. So let me see if I can paint it like this. We moved a few months ago. Not far, just to a house across town. Same road that I take to get home from the church, same exits, same landmarks, a lot of the same things of what it takes to get home now. The only major difference now to my new home is that I don't take this old exit here. What I do is I go further down the road to get to this new exit. Now, I don't know if this has ever happened to you as well, but there was a time for the first few weeks to where getting home to the new house was difficult for me. I don't know if it was because, I traveled that old route so long, muscle memory would just kick in. And I can't tell you how many times that I found myself halfway down that old exit ramp realizing, oh wait, I don't live here anymore. I don't drive this way anymore. This is not the way that I go to come home anymore. I live over there. I live over there now. Seriously, there came a point to where I had to consciously remind myself, no, you don't take that exit anymore. You don't live there anymore. That's not where your house is anymore. You live over there now. This is where you live. And I tell you that to tell you this, is that not the Christian life? Is not the Christian life learning to not take the old exits anymore, but to drive in your new heart down a new road toward your new home? That's what Paul is getting at here in Ephesians. It's how the gospel retrains your reflexes so that you drive a new road with your new heart toward your new home. It's learning to say, that's not my house anymore. I live over there now. And listen, for the directionally challenged among us, that includes me, I'm horrible with directions. For the directionally challenged among us, I know that's not easy. Learning to take a new exit is not an easy thing. There's patience required. There's time that's required. There's what Dallas Willard used to call grace-driven effort that's required. You know, I'm hearing Dallas Willard now. He says, the path of spiritual growth in the riches of Christ is not a passive one. Grace is not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. Effort is action, earning is attitude. You've never seen people more active than those who have been set on fire by the grace of God. That's Ephesians. That's Ephesians. It's people who have been set on fire by the grace of God to travel a new road with a new heart toward a new home. And so now what Paul is doing is he's getting us to Ephesians 6. And he's gonna zoom in on a place where that new road meets real life. And that's at home. Because again, parenting is where this gospel that we believe moves from theory to practice. It's where the rubber really meets the road. I mean, for parents in here, let me just ask this. How often are you tempted to take those old exits? That comparison exit is the end of a long day and you're in the drive-thru picking up something for your family. You're scrolling through Instagram. All of a sudden you see this mom who has really curated this Norman Rockwell-esque picture of feeding her family this delicious dinner of kale that she grew in her backyard. And her kids seem to love kale. That's the comparison exit. What about the anger exit? That precious little angel that you have one nerve left, and that precious little angel has decided to put on her tap shoes and tap dance all over that last nerve of yours. You want to control everything. You want to make sure that we control all the outcomes. Don't look now, but that's that fear exit that's coming out. You start replaying mistakes in your head. You're wondering if you've already blown it and it's just too late to get this thing right. There's that guilt exit that you can take. But let me tell you the beauty of Ephesians 6 here. The beauty of Ephesians 6 is this, that parenting isn't just the place where we fail. Parenting is the place where the gospel transforms us. Home is one of the primary places where we learn to travel a new road with a new heart toward a new home. But it's also where our kids are learning how to take that new road. And that's exactly where Paul's gonna go next. Because if you look at Ephesians 6, 1-3, Paul's gonna paint this picture of what happens when the gospel begins to go to work at home. So let's read this together. This is Ephesians 6, starting in verses 1, and we'll go through 3. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. So right away, you see two layers of the same idea here. You see obey and you see honor. Here's what Paul's getting at. There's a progression here. Think of obedience as the starting point. Obedience is gonna teach children how to respond rightly to authority. Think of honor as the goal. Honor shapes the kind of people they become for the rest of their lives. Obedience is the starting point, honor is the goal. Put it another way, obedience trains the hands, honor transforms the heart. Obedience trains the hands, honor transforms the heart. So let's get into this. Paul says this, he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. So let's stop down right here. Kids, students, eyes on me right here because this is talking to you. That phrase that says in the Lord there, obey your parents in the Lord. That means that obedience isn't blind. Obedience isn't robotic. Obedience is a response to God's authority expressed through your parents. Now, why do I say that? Because when kids learn to obey and respect and submit to their parents, they're learning to obey, respect, and submit to God. That's why Paul doesn't ground this in convenience. Paul grounds this in creation order here. He says, for this is right. And honestly, this is where Paul is really gonna collide with our culture, a very countercultural statement that Paul is saying here. And I'm not saying this, by the way, to gain approval points with boomers and Gen X here. I'm not saying it for that reason. But I am saying that what Paul's saying here for children to obey, that's radically counterculture for our society today. Because if you look at parenting surveys, and I've looked at a lot of parenting surveys, when you look at the traits that parents wanna see in their kids, obedience is hardly ever there. A recent Pew study came out just a year ago, and it found that only 6% of Americans list obedience as a top trait that they want for their kids. What you found on that study is we want them to be confident. We want them to be creative. We want them to be independent. We want them to be successful. Those are great things. We want those things for our kids. I want those things for my kids. I'm just saying you never see obedience on that list. I don't know, maybe it's because obedience seems a little archaic. You know, maybe it sounds old-fashioned, maybe even oppressive, like it may crush their uniqueness and their creativity. But here in Ephesians, though, that's really not the case at all, because Paul is not linking obedience to control. Paul is linking obedience to flourishing. It's not about control, it's about flourishing. He's showing that obedience is how children learn that authority isn't an enemy. Authority is a gift. Because, and this is key, when children obey, they're not just keeping peace in the home. What he's saying is that they're practicing faith. They're learning that boundaries aren't barriers. Boundaries are blessings. Listen, phones. Some kids have phones, some kids don't have phones. No judgment on if you have a phone or if you don't have a phone. But if you're a kid in here and you're saying, man, all my friends have phones and I don't have a phone. I need a phone. I'm so left out because of a phone. Listen, stop right there. It's not a barrier. It's a blessing. Because I'm just gonna guess that it's not about punishing you. It's about protecting you. Curfews? I'm gonna sound 1,000 years old when I say this. But I don't care if you're 18 or 38, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. There's some amens, there we go. It's not about controlling you. It's about the fact that we're trying to get you to live until you're 38. Chores. I was handed a note before the service. Carter Covington, when you do your chores, you're learning responsibility. A random church member who I don't know at all told me that before the service, that when you learn your chores, to do chores, you're learning responsibility in this word, and that's a blessing. Why? Because obedience trains the hands. Obedience trains the hands. But then you look at what Paul is gonna do next. Well, look at verse 2. Paul's going to reach back to the 10 Commandments. Look at verse 2, he says, honor your father and mother. I wanna stop down and highlight that word honor. If you have a pencil, pen, highlighter, tube of lipstick, whatever you got, highlight that word honor there. Because the word honor there literally means to give weight to. To give weight to. To honor someone is to treat them as significant. It means to recognize the gravity of their God-given role. So when Paul stacks up honor on top of obedience, what he's showing is progression of maturity here. Obedience is the action of childhood. Honor is the attitude that continues for a lifetime. Look, when you grow up and you move out, you may not be under your parents' authority anymore, but you're never released from your call to honor them. Obedience expires, honor doesn't. Now keep going to verse 3. Honor your father and mother. Paul reminds us this. He says, this is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Now that line, it should sound familiar for us because that's straight out of the 10 Commandments. Paul's hearkening back to the 10 Commandments here. And what's interesting about the commandment to honor your father and mother is that it's right in the middle of the 10 Commandments. So the first 4 commandments are about your relationship with God. So you got no other gods before me, no idols, don't take the Lord's name in vain. That's the first 4 commandments. The last 5 commandments are about your relationship with other people. Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie. What you've got is the command to honor your father and mother right in the middle of the 10 Commandments. So the question is, which side does it belong on? Is it about your relationship with people, or is it about your relationship with God? And the answer is yes. That's exactly what it is. Because what he's getting at here, when Paul's talking about the commandment to honor your father and mother, he's talking about this bridge that's in the middle of the 10 Commandments. He's talking about the relationship with another human who for a time stands in the place of God's authority in your life. So when a child learns how to obey and honor their parents, they're learning how to obey and honor God. When they're learning to live under loving authority in the home, they're learning how to live under divine authority in the world. That's why Paul brings up the commandment here, because God's design for the home was never about control. It was never about keeping order. It was designed to be a blessing of flourishing for the next generation. So when Paul quotes Ephesians, or quotes the 10 Commandments in Ephesians, he's saying when honor has taken root in the home, when kids honor their parents, what he's saying is that there will be flourishing, not only in the home, but also everywhere you go. It's not about length of life. It's about depth of life. Because obedience trains the hands, honor transforms the heart. Let me see if I can get practical here. My dad used to tell me these stories of obedience and honor growing up all the time. And now I find myself telling my kids these stories about obedience and honor. One of the stories that he said, I tell my kids this all the time. I said, there's a dad and his daughter who are walking down a railroad track. And all of a sudden, the dad yells, "Jump!" And the daughter immediately jumps. And a train comes blowing by right there. Her obedience literally saved her life. That's what I tell my kids all the time, man. Look, obedience is not necessarily understanding the why all the time. Obedience is about trusting that mom and dad see things that you can't. How about this one? Teenagers in here? It's just a little advice from Uncle David, just for a minute. The way that you honor your parents' authority in the home will shape how you handle authority in every area of your life. Your boss, coach, teacher, even God himself. Again, that's what Paul means when he says that it may go well with you. It's not magic. It's not some expecto patronum. It's wisdom. If you learn obedience and honor now, things will typically go better for you later in life. Not to mention, get this one. For those of you who are gonna be looking for a husband and wife one day, whoever it is that you're eyeing, whoever it is that you have your eye on, pay attention to how they treat their parents. Look, ladies, if he treats his mom well, and I'm not talking about how his mom makes a sandwich for him every single day and there's this kind of weird codependent thing. I'm not talking about that. Run from that. That won't go well for you. You need to run from that. Run from that. No. But if he honors his mom well, if he's kind to his mom, if he holds his mom in high esteem, there's a pretty good chance that he's going to honor you and hold you in high esteem. Guys, if she treats her dad poorly, if she's critical of her dad, if her dad is just a credit card and a set of keys, more than likely that's how she's going to treat you. Because here's the truth. Family systems are some of the most powerful things, the most powerful shaping influences in our life. Family systems will profoundly impact how we handle authority, how we resolve conflict, how we love our spouse. Now, married people in here, when I say that, don't be elbowing, don't be like, your mother, don't say that. This is for their preparation. This is not for you to use as ammunition. But if I could just say this is why I love our church so much. It's because we're a multi-generational church. You look to your right, you look to your left, and you see old, you see young, you see people in all different life seasons. We have people in our church to where you can lean on that relationship a little bit. You know, when you're thinking that you blew it yet again, you can talk to somebody who's driving that road, a little longer than you are, who has a new heart a little longer than you are. You can talk with them, and then they could talk with you and say, hey, listen, you're not a failure. You didn't blow it. Look, here's what we did. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. Let's talk this through, and let's kind of figure out what your next step is. Again, that's why I love our church. If I've got a parenting question, if I'm wondering, man, is this normal? I mean, I'm texting Gary, I'm texting Richard, I'm texting Judd. Pierce and I, one of the other guys who preaches up here, we text each other from time to time, and we'll be like, hey man, my kid's doing this. Is this normal? I mean, is this a normal thing? And inevitably that conversation is go to, hey man, we should probably text Gary and Richard and see if this is normal. Another one of the guys who I text, I get coffee with, I talk with about to find some perspective, to find out, hey man, am I doing this right? What can I be doing better? I'm gonna invite him up because verse 4 is about what parents are to do. 1 through 3 is the result, obedience and honor. That's the result. In verse 4, Paul's gonna get into how that actually happens. What does it look like not just for the gospel to take root in a home and transform your kids, but now what does it look like for the gospel to take root in a home and start to transform you? And so Keith Lair, he's a longtime church member here. He is a teacher in the Connections Life Group. He's also a professor of New Testament at Dallas Baptist University. I've asked him to come up here and to talk a little bit about how to actually work through verse 4. And so Keith, why don't you come on up here? Let's give Keith Lair a big round of applause.
You coming over here?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate
Let's come to
the
our
invitation.
Coffee table and
right.
Talk through what verse 4 looks like. Can we get verse 4 on the screen? Because I want us to walk through this. Keith is a little further down the road than I am. He's not old. He's just further down the road than I am.
He's old.
And he's raised 2 grown boys. One just turned 30. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Here's what I want us to do. When I see that verse right there where it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. I see 2 commands there. Mm-hmm. The first is, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. How do we do that?
Well, I guess at our house, had we fed them kale every night, that would have provoked them to anger.
A little bit.
So that's something we should avoid.
Something.
Well, a couple of things, just real quick, that I have learned that sometimes we as grown-ups, we have stress, we have pressure, we have things going on in our lives, and often we have a tendency, because Susan, my wife, sometimes would look at me when I would come home and she was clearly understanding that I had had a bad day. And I would interact with my children in a way that was not altogether great. And the first thing she would say is, what happened to you today? And oftentimes that is something that we do. I bring what I'm going through, and unfortunately those I love most and those that I should be most sensitive to how I'm responding to them, I often bring those that I'm closest to my bad day. And I think that frustrates children. The other thing that I think is very frustrating for children is that when we as parents forget they're actually children. And we create expectations of them that's not consistent with where they are in their lives, based on their age or their maturity level. And so we need real wisdom from God to do that, to make sure that I'm not trying to treat a child like this child is a grown-up. And I think that can be very frustrating for kids.
No, that's a good word. So let me kind of peel into this a little bit more. I'm 36 years old. I've been on my own since I was 18. I have a great relationship with my dad, but there are times when unintentionally, maybe he says something, and I even still have some anger kind of flare up a little bit. And so if I read this correctly, I don't think that prohibition for anger, that provoking to anger, stops when they're 18 years old, when they're 22 years old, or whoever. What does it look like to not provoke your adult children to anger? I hear that from people that parenting adult children is difficult and has its own set of challenges. And so what does that look like to not provoke your adult children to anger?
So if I'm being honest, and I should be honest with you, right? If I'm being honest, one of the parenting is different at every phase of our parenting journey. Yeah. I have said to Susan so many times, for me, one of the hardest times is being a parent of an adult child. And I think what is frustrating to adult children is when we are still parenting like they're living under our roof and they're children, and they're not, they're grown up. And so that is a challenge, and I have struggled with that. Yeah. So kind of remembering that things change. The instruction part of verse 4 is probably gonna look like this when they're little, and then it should go down the older they get. And the instruction should probably turn into more of a conversation as they get older. Because that's where they are, and they are adults, and they are grown, and so they don't need the instruction as they did when they were younger.
That's a good word. On the flip side, how does an adult child care for their aging parent? How does an adult child honor their aging parent? Because remember what we said is obedience expires, honor doesn't. What does it look like for honor to not have an expiration date in your life?
Yeah. I lost both my mom and my dad when I was a young man in my 20s. So they've been gone for well over 30 years. Susan and I are blessed with her parents being here, and we are going through that right now with them. She is wonderful about helping them and walking with them. And so I guess I would say be present. Okay. Be there for your aging parents. Sometimes that's fun and easy, and sometimes it's not. From my perspective, I've always told myself for a long time now, if I could have lunch with one person that I can't have lunch with, it would be my mom. Oh. And you know what? Things change in life. People go to heaven and they're not here forever. And so make the most of every opportunity. Be there for your parents. Cherish the time that you have. Sometimes it's gonna be hard. Sometimes it's gonna be frustrating, but cherish that time. Kind of power through and ask God to help you because it's a really, no regrets, right? We don't wanna look back and go, I wish I would have done this or I wish I would have done that.
Help me build out this list because I want to take it practically a little bit more too. I'm thinking, young adults, call your parents. Is there any parent in here who would not raise their hand and say, yeah, I'll take a call from my adult child? Sure, I'd love that. That'd be great. Yeah, I think calling them. Anything else come to mind of just spending time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go to lunch with them, help them as they may have more needs in their life to spend time. I just can't, it's a parenting thing and even a grown child thing, spending time and however that looks and however they're needed in the moment.
Yeah. The second command, first command is don't provoke your children to anger. The second command is, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Admittedly, I have a hard time figuring out the balance of those two things. Discipline and instruction of the Lord. Can you help us kind of tease out what does that look like to balance those things that Paul's commanding here?
So verse 4, it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up, which that word really means to nourish and to nurture your children. the part about bringing them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. These two words are almost the same when Paul is writing them, discipline and instruction. They have very little difference except for the following, and I think this is wildly important for us as children. The first one is the word in my Bible, discipline, which you could translate that to mean training up our children. And that is an action word. So that is the things that we do. And the second one, instruction or admonition, it's a verbal word. It's how we instruct by words. And so when I put these things together, so the first is an action word, to train our children, to discipline our children. Well, certainly disciplining them is an action, it's an activity. But I think the important thing that I have to remind myself is my children are watching all the time. By the way, that's another thing that I think frustrates children. When what I tell them that I want them to do is not consistent with what I'm doing. And so a lot of times it's really about who I am and not necessarily what I do as a parent. It's oftentimes more about being than doing. I'll tell you what I mean by that. One verse here specifically for parents here in this passage, verse 4, about what to do. And I look at that and I think, wow, Lord, that's not really very much. I know for Susan and I, and every generation has had a parenting book. Whatever your generation is, you have had a parenting book. And countless times I would say to Susan about our boys, how come for us, it's never in the book, right? It just doesn't ever seem to be in the book. And I think sometimes we look at the Bible that way and go, could you have given us a little bit more? And my answer would be, it's in the book. And you're like, well, what do you mean? Well, it's about what we model for our children. David was talking about studying Ephesians, and we've learned a lot of things in chapters 4, 5, and 6. We've learned about walking in unity and holiness and love and in light and walking in wisdom. So to me, there's this element of, am I being the parent that I want my kids to become? And there's study after study in all kinds of contexts that say followers will be less likely to follow leaders if their words and their actions are not consistent. So that's just a question for me. Am I modeling for my children through my life that which I want them to become? And then finally it says those last three words, that I do all of this of the Lord. I raise my children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. God is first, and to actually keep him first in my life, in my parenting, and in my instruction for my children.
Such a good word, man. Hey,
thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the coffees and the conversations before.
Anytime.
Thank you for the coffees and the conversations. They're gonna happen afterwards. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Can y'all?
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. When you came in here, you got your Lord's Supper elements. If you would, go ahead and get those out. I grew up in Florida. Tough night last night, tough night. I knew that was, fine, that was deserved. I did some sailing growing up. I had a friend who had a sailboat, and we would get out and we'd tool around the bayous and the bays and just kind of take that sailboat out. There's two ways to get to a destination if you're in a sailboat. One is obviously to lift up the sails, catch the wind, and get you to your destination. The second is to paddle. I would highly recommend the sailing as opposed to the paddling. When I think of like what got me here, and I'm not saying by any means that I've got it all together. I don't at all. Still trying to figure this sanctification thing out. The Lord is kind. The Lord is working in me, through me. But when I think of, man, I'm at a point to where I'm trying to follow the Lord. I'm trying to lead my family well. I'm praying that the gospel takes root in my home. I think what got me to that point is not degrees. It's not job opportunities. It's not this thing came up. It's not that. It was having godly parents who blew the wind in my sails to get me where I needed to go. my dad did not pawn me off on the coach. He didn't pawn me off on the school. If I find this school, then that'll teach my kids how to walk with the Lord. My dad was my first Sunday school teacher. My dad was my first Old Testament professor. My dad was my first New Testament professor. And even as I say that, I know that a lot of you in here, I would say statistics would actually indicate that most of you in here couldn't say that. Maybe you grew up in an environment where, your dad and your mom, they didn't do those things. Maybe you grew up in an environment where there was a divorce situation. Maybe, heaven forbid, there was some abuse there. Let me say one of two things, and then we'll take the Lord's Supper. Number one is this. Some of the godliest men and women that I know, in fact, one in particular, he had a dad growing up who wasn't around very much. And when he was around, he really wished he wasn't. But there was a point in his life where he said, not on my watch. The curse ends with me. It stops with me. I'm writing a new page, a new chapter, a new book. I'm not gonna be a victim because of what my dad or my mom did or didn't do. Because I'm starting something new today. And as we take this is the second encouragement. Number one, that it's possible. But number two, as we take this bread and as we take this cup, listen, when we take this as remembrance of what Jesus did for us in giving his body and his blood, this is a reminder that if the tomb is empty, anything is possible. If a man rose from the dead, don't tell me that you can't determine today that it stops with you and you start a new chapter. Don't tell me that's not possible. Because if a man can rise from the dead, God can resurrect and restore anything that's been broken in your family. So on the night that Jesus was killed, he took bread and he said, this is my body which has been given for you. Eat it. On the same night, he took the cup, and after blessing it, he said, this is the blood of the new covenant that's shed for you. As often as you eat of this bread and drink of this blood, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. We drink the cup. Father, we praise you and we bless you. Lord, I pray that this reality of remembrance of what you have done by the work of your son on the cross, and then by raising him from the dead, that gospel that we proclaim, that we hold to, the good news that Jesus is alive, I pray that that reality would be infused into every single family, every single person, every single life stage, that those who don't know you would call upon you, that those who know you but are hurting would call upon you, that those who know you but know that hurting is coming would call upon you. Lord, I pray that you would do what Keith can't do, what I can't do, what Gary can't do, Richard can't do, what none of us can do. That you would transform lives by the power of your gospel. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.